So this rabbi, Raphael Shore, grew up in Canada, went through the process that I did, where you're living in a world where you know you're Jewish, but you really don't see too much difference between yourself and the Gentiles, except I did. Gentiles were not my friends, and there was a lot of rich Jews that weren't my friends either. But I lived in a secure Jewish world, which was really very secularized, and I didn't realize it. Who's afraid of the big bad Jew? Many years ago, Meir Kahane wrote a book which was entitled Why Be Jewish? The truth is that at that time the majority of Jews had no idea, and it's still like that now today, but we have something happening in the world. What's happening in the world is that there are a lot of people who are afraid of us, and they have to do something about us. They can't let us prosper. And we've been living in strange places for 2,000 years since the destruction of fraught on the Jewish people by the Romans, which the rabbis say are actually descendants from our fraternal brother Esau. Anyway, that's another story. Who's afraid of the big bad Jew? Learning to love the lessons of Jew hatred, and here we go. Jews are experiencing a new world, seeing a side of the world they either didn't know or thought no longer existed. As NYU student Bella Ingber testified to Congress, being a Jew at NYU is being surrounded by students and faculty who support the murder and kidnapping of Jews because, after all, as they say, resistance is justified. It is being surrounded by social justice warriors and self-proclaimed feminists who call for justice and abruptly and when their calls for justice end abruptly, when the rape victims are Jews. Being a Jew at NYU's experience how diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a value that NYU extends to its Jewish students. Today in 2023, she wrote, at NYU I hear calls to gas the Jews, and I am told that Hitler was right. Now, many Jews are now wondering what's happening. How do we make sense of this new reality? Is there something bigger behind the hate or to being Jewish? These questions are on the minds of many Jews and non-Jews, but cogent answers are very hard to find. Jewish identity, as it was presented to me in my generation, seemed to revolve around remembering the Holocaust. Now, in my generation, because I'm older, they were just really figuring out the Holocaust at that time. And a few cultural tidbits, like, say, lox and bagel. For me, anti-Semitism was not a reason to be Jewish, and anyone can eat a bagel. I wanted a positive reason to be Jewish, if there was one. If there wasn't, well, then it was time to move on. I also wanted to be like everyone else. I thought I was. I played hockey, partied, enjoyed everything my suburban Canadian life had to offer. But just when I thought I might have leave Judaism behind, I began to discover reasons to stay. At 20, my twin brother found God. So first of all, we see that Rabbi Shore has a twin brother. I thought he was crazy, nuts. At first, we had always been competitive, and that didn't change with his newfound religiosity. We debated. I asked him a lot of questions and was surprised that he had intelligent responses. It got me thinking for the first time about deep life questions. I reflected on being Jewish, although I did not believe in God. I had to admit there was an unarticulated sense in me that we as Jews were distinct in some way. Anytime I met a fellow Jew, it felt a bit like we were family. To move forward, I needed answers to my basic Jewish questions. I had lists 4 questions. Was there an explanation for my feelings of being part of a larger family? Was there a reason for anti-Semitism? For the peculiar constancy of enmity against us? How do we explain the outside Jewish impact on the world? Number 4, how did we survive for so long? Well, that's very interesting. We have Chaim Beinart that we're doing in our series on Jewish geography in the Middle Ages. The question over there is, how did the Jews survive the Middle Ages? At that time, the Catholic Church was roaring with hatred for Jews. Somehow we survived. I wanted to go beyond the conventional wisdom and insufficient narrative I had been given in Hebrew school, synagogue, and family holiday gatherings. As I began my journey of exploration, one of my first steps for insight was reading about the Dalai Lama's investigation. What investigation? I found he was asking some of the same questions as described in the book The Jew and the Lotus. Now, that's interesting. Across the generation from the 1950s to the 1980s, the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibet, held a series of meetings with Jewish scholars and thinkers to learn the secrets of Jewish survival. Not only did we survive the Middle Ages, we survived the Romans. We survived the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Medes. We'll survive the Arabs too. The Tibetans, like the Jews, had been forced into a global diaspora by military invasion and religious persecution. Neither the Jews nor the Tibetans are unique in that regard. Human history is filled with the stories of ethnic and religious groups who were invaded, conquered, subjugated, and dispersed. In time, these groups usually faded away and were forgotten. But the Jews had survived for thousands of years as a people without a homeland. This mystery is what the exiled Tibetan religious leader hoped to learn so that he could help his people emulate this success and endure. Now, the part that I was thinking as you said that, not only did we endure for 2,000 years away from our land, that wasn't the first time, but we've come back. And we always kept trying to come back, and we continue to try to come back. So he was not only immersed by Jewish survival, he was amazed that Jews had maintained a common culture, faith, identity, and brotherhood, and even more, they were successful. They not only survived, they thrived. The Dalai Lama wanted to know how the Jews did it, so did I. What is it about the Jew that so much of a humanity, for good or bad, remains mindful of them? They think about us all the time. And how did the Jews fit into the family of humanity? I've dove in to understand what being Jewish is about. I wanted to know how and why the Holocaust could have happened in the modern world. What were people thinking? I studied classical Jewish texts about the Jewish people and explored why anti-Semites say that they hate Jews. I delved into texts some might avoid, including Hitler's Mein Kampf, and everything he wrote or said that was available in English. Studying Hitler, I learned he had a clearly articulated ideology. This surprised me because I had always thought he was a raving lunatic and just lived on hate, like so many people do. His own writings and speeches made it clear that the complete elimination of the Jews in Europe was to him the logical conclusion of his ideology. As I dug deeper, I made a second shocking discovery. The two world views, Hitler's ideology and Jewish philosophy, shared many common ideas. I know that sounds crazy, right? But stay with me. Now, let's see what he said again. The two worldviews, Hitler's ideology and Jewish philosophy, they have a lot of ideas in common. What I observed was that they were almost like mirror images of each other, but one side had a positive view while the other side was negative. This strange insight will be unpacked in this book. But suffice it to say now that both sides touched on the most important questions about being human, and it is fascinating. Now, this book will explain the surprising root causes of anti-Semitism. That is not why I wrote it. Sure, it's important to know why Jews are hated because, as Harvard professor Ruth Wise said, as long as our actual awareness of the roots and character of anti-Semitism remains shallow and poorly informed, it will not lessen the clear and present danger. Now, what is exactly this said? Did she say? She says, understanding Jew hatred is not this book's purpose. My interest lies in the meaning of it all. This book answers why Jews have been hated in a very unconventional way to reveal the more important and positive why, the why of the Jewish people, what it means for Jews and all of humanity. So he writes like this. He says, thousands of years ago, the Jewish story began when the wanderer, our father Abraham, traveled more than 2,000 miles to what is today the land of Israel. Like Abraham, I began a journey from even farther away, both geographically and spiritually, that eventually brought me to Israel to question who I was, what my purpose was, and what the content of my life should be. Life should have meaning and beauty. Abraham left behind a booming civilization with its magnificent towers, great temples, and vast markets because he understood there was more. I too had a deep feeling that there was more. My journey led me to discover the profound meaning of my Jewish identity. I had ended up becoming a rabbi, getting married and raising a family with my wife in Israel. Because of all that I've experienced and the people I've met along the way, I believe that sharing what I've learned can help all Jews understand more about both who they are and why much of the world is reacting the way they are. This hatred and doublespeak. Once again today, it's happening. My main reason for writing Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew is to lay out clearly what has been quite concealed in this generation. That is, the mission and purpose of the Jewish people and humanity actually, all of humanity, and how these lessons and ideas can enhance our lives today. In the process, we will explore the deeper reasons for anti-Semitism, including the Holocaust, why, and how it happened. When the Torah describes an earlier attempt to destroy the Jews and how God transformed the sorcerer Bilam's curses into blessings, the Talmud adds that from the blessing of that wicked person Bilam, you can ascertain what was in his heart. This book reveals the inverse, that from the curses of Hitler and other Jew haters we can learn about our blessings. After 3,500 years of existence and 2,000 years of exile and oppression, the Jewish people have remarkably survived, returned home, and as the Dalai Lama recognized, continued to thrive, even in the worst of times. But with the message of time and the passage of time, the stresses of persecution, perhaps some negative Jewish social educational experiences, and today's social pressure towards universalism, many Jews have understandably become indifferent and fairly uninformed about what we stand for. After October 7th, with so many questions raised and so few answers, can we Jews provide the Dalai Lama and ourselves a coherent answer on what our secret is? And do these answers have relevance and meaning for you and me today? These are not uniquely Jewish questions. They are fundamentally human ones. Who's afraid of the big bad Jew? is a helpful read for all concerned people who care for their society's health. Because Jew hatred is not just a Jewish problem. Its very existence is, in essence, a barometric reading of the moral health of society, which you have to really worry about American society. Because of the bad in one place can bring a tremendous bad from another place. And the fighting in between, that's where we find the Jews. In other words, the rise of anti-Semitism is a harbinger of moral decline. As Rabbi Lord Sachs often said, the hate that begins with Jews never ends with Jews. The Jewish people are the proverbial canary in the coal mine, the bird that is destined to be the first victim and alerts others to the impending lethal danger of gas leaks. But they are never the last victim when a society has lost moral clarity and conviction. Now this is happening here around us in the United States. I live in a community, thank God, Baruch Hashem, in Boca Raton, which is like a suburb. And there are synagogues here. And it's just like a beautiful, peaceful, beautiful place in time. And this will continue on with God's blessing. This book shares my personal journey of discovery and flips anti-Semitism on its head, shedding light on its profound insights. Its insights for Jewish identity and its broader implications for civilization. In doing so, I hope that it serves as a beneficial guide towards personal and collective empowerment. This is Baruch Fleischman. You've been listening to the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and this really is a profound book, I think, for today. Remember, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, I really have to look up and see when Meir Kahane was killed. But he's a person who was speaking to a small audience, because at the time that 50 years ago, the Jewish people were in a terrible state, out in the suburbs, influenced by Jews, rabbis, so-called rabbis, who were really taking us in the wrong direction towards more assimilation into American culture. And we see that in the midst of this, stop supporting genocide. That's what Hitler said. The Jews are destroying the world. This is Baruch Fleischman, Tikkun Elevator Kollel.